Welcome to the Instinctive Influencers podcast, a show where influence becomes one of your tools for success. Now, here are your hosts, Brian Weber and Ed Haley.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I am Ed.
And this is the Instinctive Influencers podcast. Ed, here we are once again, another week. Crazy thing is, this week, man, we're actually doing a show. It's about the title of the show, which is Influence, man. And I'll tell you, the article that we studied and we've looked over, I really find it to be not only reassuring, but also informing at the same time.
Yeah, I like these. These are good articles. So I told you before, one of my things I like to do is I like to kind of read something. Thank you, Bearded Ninja, to start my day when I get to work. And these are the articles that are ideal for that. These NCO Journal articles, you know, we've used from the Green Notebook before. Those kind of short, quick hit articles are so much better for that. And you still get something out of it. Like hopefully the audience finds out today from this article.
And with that, we'd like to have a word from our sponsor. If you're a man with a beard, no hair, and just grizzled chest, and you're looking for just the right amount of beard balm made of snake venom and pomade, then it's the Bearded Ninja Pomade. Nowhere sold, nowhere found. It's only imaginary.
For now.
Every time we say his name, man. Every time we say his name, I feel like we've got to, do an advertisement or something for him. It's like we're getting paid to talk about him. But you know what, though, Ed? It kind of reminds me because the fact that you said you mentioned about him and the fact that you kind of learned. It's one of those things that you've picked up about, getting that one small article to read. I find myself kind of doing the same thing throughout the day. And then we reference throughout. I would definitely have to say that when we get into this particular study we did, and it's an article for those who are out there, I'm going to make sure I put the hyperlink. It's an article found in the NCO Journal. It's called The Value of Influence, and it was actually written by Sergeant Major Kenneth Farley. Now, I'm not familiar with him. He's from the 4th Infantry Division, which is where I'm going. And he goes over, there's basically two different types of influence. And I find that the Bearded Ninja himself I felt like is one of these. And he has even said, though, when we would talk to him, that he actually had tendencies in the other side of it too. So I'm kind of excited to get into that. And I just felt that it's kind of crazy how you brought that up. And it actually, that's a big part of what we're going to talk about.
Yes, Pat, and you're an influence as well. Yeah, no, it kind of does go hand in hand. I didn't even do that on purpose either. That was just instinctive. It just happened.
Random.
Yeah.
I mean, but you think about it, a lot of times that's how, because normally we talk before the show, and we talked before the show started, this recording. We always do it. We talk for, chit chat for, I don't know, goodness, half hour, 45 minutes sometimes.
Yeah.
And usually we take from whatever we talked about and we kind of ingrain that in the beginning of the show versus we really didn't talk about this, but it is one of those things that we just know in the back of our head that, you and I were influenced by him a certain way, and we don't realize how much we value that. And that's what the article's about, value of influence. We don't realize how much we value that, and we continue on doing those types of actions that we were influenced to do.
Yeah, I mean, and that's good. That just shows, it speaks, we've done episodes on legacy and stuff. That speaks to the legacy of them. That speaks to their influence on us. And to me, it's really weird because at the time when I'm working for him, I'm not thinking of it that way. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not thinking, hey, this has been, months, like 16 months down the line. I'm not, going, in 16 months, I'm going to read articles because that's what the Bearded Ninja kind of has shown me helps to get his day started. It's just happened.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll tell you the truth. It feels like it was the right move to make because every time we get to do this, it kind of helps us with the show in itself. But I think we should just jump right into this, Ed. There's a lot here to kind of cover over. I really do enjoy, how he broke it down. And, with the value of influence, it's really about how we value influence and use it in a sense. There's exercising power to influence. And then there's two different types we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about personal power and then also positional power. And I really like how he broke this down. So let's jump right into this. Right off the bat, he says, influence is the ability to alter another person's beliefs, values, actions, or thoughts. This ability is based off a trusting relationship that can take time to establish and maintain. And then he has this quote. It's from Cameron Bishop, basically at Forbes. Leadership is more than just having authority over other employees. Strong leadership exists at every level of an organization. Effective leadership positively influences your team and others around you. As an influencer, you naturally move people towards success by the way you carry yourself, your reputation, your credibility, and how you communicate. Influencers exhibit behaviors that people appreciate and want to replicate. I feel like almost that particular quote kind of sums up where we've gone with this show. I've talked about it before. There's what's considered the social media influencers, which to me is really not leadership. It's just kind of like getting people to follow you a certain direction. And it's probably not for the greatest of reasons. A lot of times it's just to make money off of them. Versus we're actually talking about influencing in a leadership manner to get people to be able to become their better selves in a sense.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I told you earlier, we have these shows that we got mapped out for the listeners. And this week, you and I sat down last week and said, we're going to record these shows on this date, this show on this date. And I prepped a show that is going to kind of speak to what you're talking about right now. When we do the show, the six basic tendencies of human behavior. So that's why these influencers exhibit behaviors that people appreciate and want to replicate. We're going to talk about why that is as far as human behavior in that episode. So it's just funny that I prepped the wrong episode, but it kind of helps out with this episode moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's kind of cool that you've already got it all prepped, even though we're not going to probably record it for a little bit. And I think actually that show's coming out in like 3 or 4 from this one. So it'll be a little bit down the road. Yeah. But I mean, it's still good that you can reflect upon it now and then reflect upon it later. And I love the idea of the human behavior part, because if it's kind of ingrained in us in the human behaviors, we tend to fall back on it more, kind of like muscle memory, versus if it's unnatural, then it doesn't feel right. And then we tend to basically kind of let it just fall to the wayside and ignore it and don't ever do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, for us, from the military side of the house, influence, when we talk about influencers exhibit behaviors, well, that's what we're always taught, right? Lead from the front, be the example, set the example, because we're trying to set the example to make those soldiers want to replicate that. And then therefore we can leave the Army. You and I can retire finally in a few years, who knows how long, but we know that we're leaving the Army in good hands because we did exhibit those behaviors that the soldiers, junior soldiers, wanted to replicate at the senior level.
You say that, Ed, and I would have to say that wasn't my focus probably until I would say about a year before, about maybe 2 years before going to the academy. I didn't have that general idea. But then I want to say something kind of clicked in me, and it was about 2 years before I went to academy. It was probably around the time that I met Sergeant Major Brian. But
I thought so.
Yeah, exactly. But it felt like that I wanted to help groom those who need to take my place. Now, we are supposed to do that early on. If you're a specialist, you want to groom that private to become in your position, so you can move on to be a sergeant. And a sergeant wants to groom that specialist, and so on and so forth. But I didn't think it as such. Even though I liked teaching people stuff and all that, I just didn't think of it that way. But now it's just like I feel as if though that is my primary job in the Army. Period, is to ensure that those behind me. And I don't want to say behind me because they are, I consider them as walking beside me, but those who are junior are not left behind, and they're brought forward knowledge-wise. And we talked about in the knowledge and wisdom that they learn the way that things go, and they can actually use it through wisdom and just kind of, build on. And this article really speaks to that to me when I think about it.
Hey, so I got a question for Brian, because I know we're trying to get into the article, but this really, so you said about 2 years before you came to the academy, right?
Yes.
And then you correlated that with the arrival of Sergeant Major Bryant.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So the question is, how much impact does Sergeant Major Bryant's arrival and his behaviors as a leader influencer, how much does that play? Do you think that played a role in you making that decision at that point? Because it's just weird that those two things line up. Your mentor that you didn't know at the time, but your future mentor arrives, and then you decide, hey, you know what? I need to take this next right turn and change my course. So how much do you think that impacted you?
Oh, I think it was, I would say, if I took a diagram and I said, how what the percentage was, I definitely say 85% out of 100 was him and the learning. And it was just, I loved how he not only treated people, interacted with people. I also loved the fact that I never ever got the feeling that he was ever doing anything for personal gain. Ever. I'd never, and I could say I've seen leaders throughout able to kind of perform, but sometimes every once in a while, some people kind of fall back on, well, I got to take care of myself. I never seen that with him. Now, did he do it? Could have. I don't know. And I may ask him when I see him next. I mean, I'm going to see him around, I want to say the beginning of March, or the end of February, beginning of March. But I've never, ever seen that of him. And I was automatically attracted to that. And you know what's even funny, Ed? That very last paragraph, the last sentence in the paragraph I read that was a quote, it says, influencers exhibit behaviors that people appreciate and want to replicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, right there, it says, I mean, that guy, I don't even know who Cameron Bishop is of Forbes, but he got it on exactly the way I think it is.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because listening to you talk and knowing what I know, and actually knowing who he is and having been around him, because I didn't really work for him, but I did do some things. There were some times that, he provided some counsel to me too. I could see it, and I thought that it was an excellent, illustration of that especially that last sentence. That sentence sticks out. I mean, the whole thing that you read, the whole blurb is great. It's that one piece that really just stuck out for me, and I was curious.
No, I mean, so we want to, and I mentioned the selflessness of him, right? You remember when I was pinned, he drove all the way out from Fort Riley, like a 9-hour drive or something, to come and see it, and then drove back. I mean, that was people don't just do that normally.
I do remember that.
Yeah, so that really stuck with me, and I see that, and I'm like, man, that right there, that's personal power. Because we're going to get into this. Not positional power, but that was personal power. And it moved me to, I guess you could say, even now in the position I'm in, to do things even better, or try to pass things on even more. Just small acts like that, And I bet you've talked about your previous Sergeant Major, or he was your first Sergeant for a while, Sergeant Major Wright, and the things that he did and how it influenced you. You could almost kind of broaden this whole subject with your experiences too.
Yeah, really what he showed me is, so, we talk about evals and how important evals are, but to me, Sergeant Major Wright, he did his job, and he did it to the best of his abilities. He never did his job based on how his eval was going to look. And, that it's not a lack of caring, because he cared, but that focus on other things, not just the self, me. That's one thing that I really respected with him was, and he was not afraid to put you in a position that was going to challenge you, and you could fail at, or you could succeed at. And if you failed, then, he provided that counsel, and he brought you in his office, and he talked to you. He didn't try to, knock your head off because you failed at something that he gave you the ability to do. He came and provided some counsel, and that's probably one of the big things for me that made me want to continue and keep driving on in the military. I mean, and that's been years. Like, I haven't worked with him since it's been 11 years, almost 12. So,
Yeah.
yeah, long-lasting influence, man.
Yes, exactly. Well, I mean, we're going to dive right in this because we're going to talk about exercising power to influence. So, and really what the article is, those of you listening, the article is really dealing with what's considered power, and that's how you're actually influencing people, and you're using a certain type of power. And when I get into this, you're going to listen to this and think, hey, that kind of sounds a little bit like when you guys were doing the pay the bill for leadership capital. And I'm like, yes, exactly what it is, because in a sense, but we're just going to go a different twist on this. But here we go. It talks about the power of influence is not something that automatically comes with the position of leadership. There are two ways to get people to do what you want them to do. A leader exercises either their personal power or their positional power. Influence and power are the invigorating forces that get things done, and they are the necessary tools of a leader. Positional power derives from the organization or the position that the leader holds. Personal power exudes from the leader's expert knowledge or their motivating personality. Now, even as they got this Susan Steinbrecher here, Ed, that, who works for Inc.com, I think it is, basically states that it is about building relationships that result in authentic engagement. So we look back at our two sergeant majors that we often reference, or even the Bearded Ninja, and we think about, do you feel like you had a relationship sort of with that sergeant major or Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I definitely do. I definitely thought that it was a comfortable environment, and that I had a relationship where I was comfortable enough to speak to them. I can also tell you that when I came in the Army the first time in 1991, that was something that we didn't have. This is something that has changed over the years. You did not have a personal relationship with anybody past your first line leader, whoever was next over you, and then that was it. You didn't, like, if you saw anybody over that, then you were probably in trouble. So that's something that's kind of changed in the Army over the years as we've learned more about the importance of building relationships and having these authentic engagements, and how it influences people to accomplish missions and things of that nature.
What you said there, it really kind of resonates on something I just watched literally, I would say about 30 minutes before you and I got on here and started talking to each other. It was a Simon Sinek video, and it's, they do the press tour kind of thing, or he'll go and do his speaking engagements, and it was on his book, Infinite Game. He basically was talking about how he had done like an embedded type thing with Navy SEALs, and he kind of queried them on, what makes the ideal individual. And he had basically two different factors. One was performance. And if you looked at it kind of like a chart, right? So you have like the vertical piece was performance, and then you had the horizontal part at the bottom was trust. And he said that nobody really wants the low performance, low trust person. You're not always going to get the most high performance, high trust person. But he said the one that no one wanted and felt like was the most toxic was the high performance, low trust, because they don't know if they're going to be able to rely upon them. He said they prefer having a mediocre performer with high trust, which makes sense because at the same time, we think about what we were talking about is I trust Sergeant Major Brian. I trust Rick Williams. I mean, I just have to reach out to Rick through a messenger and send him a message. I guarantee you, if something was going on in my house and I needed assistance, I trust him so much. Yes, Rick, I need you to go to my house. This is how you get in, blah, 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 blah. And I know he would, one, take care of it. Two, he would protect my family if I needed it because I trust him. Now, do I have a personal relationship with him that's so personal that we're like best friends and, that we go and hang out all the time? No, to be completely honest, I've been to his house 3 times. One of those was to record a podcast that we interviewed with him. The other one was a fantasy football league thing, but that was a whole group of people. And another time was to pick something up from him. But that's it. So it's weird how we build relationships. We're thinking of relationships, and some people want to think that it's like a real close and all that. And we have to be careful, especially in the Army, Ed. Just as well as I do, relationships can also be deemed as fraternization. Oh, yeah. So we have to be very careful. For instance, I would say that I have a particular type of relationship with Sergeant Major Bryant, but that does not mean that he and I are best friends and we hang out and we do. I have never associated with him off duty, but it's the relationship we've built on duty that's allowed it to be our communication process. Great. I'm learning. I think he even does some learning himself. It's just that's what you want to look for. Is I like the fact that I like to go to work when he's there. You know what I mean? That's the type of thing. So yeah, it's a powerful thing, man.
Yeah, and you're right. Like and first of all, I love that you said you like to go to work, because that's kind of what I'm waiting for when I don't like to go to work. That's what I'm waiting for to decide to retire. But the relationships are different. And I think that the Army, honestly, for the listeners, I think some of these relationships that we have are unique in that, you could be, when I was at Fort Hood, we had a group of us and we were very close and we barbecued. Somebody was barbecuing, it seemed like every weekend. And then we all started going our separate ways, but you could still today, all these years later, reach out to those same people and you could kind of rekindle that relationship or ignite that relationship that you had, because that's just how the Army side is. I think that's one of the things that's unique about what we do. But those relationships that you build, and the trust, and, I would agree with you 100% that, if you called Rick Williams, then whatever you needed was going to probably happen. But those are relationships that, you nurture over time. It's just we nurture them a little different than people who are in the civilian sector, probably.
Yeah, and Ed, I think that we could relate this very much to the civilian sector in itself. If people can just look at the whole, we got to keep it professional, but at the same time, it's okay to have a little personality within. It's just you got to be careful that it doesn't basically overshadow what needs to get done. And I think that kind of builds trust too, because if I know what you're thinking, if I, as a leader in any organization, civilian or military, I know that you feel comfortable to approach me and talk to me about something. And it may be as a decision that I made and you would just either want it clarified or you want to explain a better way to do it, then I know we have the right relationship as the leader. Now, as a subordinate, if I know I can approach that person and I can talk to them, have a general conversation and not have to worry about, is this person going to, yell at me? Are they going to, they're going to completely just basically put me down, things like that. And it doesn't hurt my feelings to have that. It's just, all that tells me is I don't trust that person. And if I don't trust you, then I'm not going to probably be around you very long.
Yeah, no, those are all very valid points, because like I said, the personal power, personal relationships, I think they're important, especially, we've talked about team development. I think that it plays a huge role in that as well. Positional power is different. And I think that positional power maybe isn't, it's a respect thing, but in my mind, it's not really a powerful building block for a team, where the personal power, I think, is more of a building block when you're trying to, create this great team in your organization.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Ed, because we're actually going to get into personal power and positional power. We're going to start right off the bat with personal power. And I've got a few sentences here, and I think we're going to stop at certain points in it that we can actually kind of expand upon that. Right off the bat, it says personal power is the ability of the leader to inspire others to commit to the team's needs. See, in that, it's talking about an individual or individuals, and the leader and the team. And what it does is it's basically saying, I'm taking a group of people, I'm able to get them to work together and become a team to meet whatever the project, task, mission, whatever it is. But then here he goes. Getting an individual to commit to a common cause is based on trust with that leader. In order for leaders to gain commitment, they have to have ownership of their cause. Now, Ed, I mean, have there been times, let me ask you this, because I can tell you, I know the answer for mine, but have there been times where you just didn't feel like you owned something enough and you weren't giving it your all and you knew it was just going to fail because you just didn't like it?
There's things, here, because we do a lot of planning, sometimes if you're the alternate planner, I'm not as committed as the alternate because I don't feel like, especially it depending on the primary is, because some of these guys, they have such powerful personalities, and once they take control of something, it's theirs, and they're not, they didn't watch Barney growing up. They're not trying to share. So those are the instances. I'm not going to say that, I'm like, oh, that's going to fail, but I can say that there are times when I feel like I'm not contributing everything that I could, because it's kind of like, it's not mine. It's his. He's his strong personality. He just took over. He's the primary. I'm just here to go to meetings he can't attend, kind of thing.
So I want to make sure I get this right. Basically, you're kind of saying that like their thoughts and ideas are what's going to drive the entire thing, and not using feedback from others.
Yeah, so they lack that. They don't, some of them, their personalities and their ideas they're so overbearing that they don't really consider what you're saying at that point. There's onesies, twosies, but when you get teamed up with them, it makes it difficult for you as a person to really get in and take some ownership, because it's like every time I suggest something, it kind of gets, yeah, all right, well, we're gonna do it this way though. So yeah, it is. Yeah. It's a challenge, and it's difficult, and it doesn't happen frequently. But I have been a part of a mission like that. Now, my relationship with that particular person changed over the last few months, and I openly will tell them, all right, you're just trying to do too much. Like, we're going to work together. So, and it took a while for me to come to that realization and to have that personal relationship that I would felt like I could tell them, hey, you don't have to do it all. I need a piece of this pie. You can have 3 slices, but I want the 4th slice of the pie,
Yeah. But it's funny that you said that, because we are talking about the trust factor, and with trust, it just takes time to build. It's not like right off the bat, I say, and this is a Simon Sinek saying too, not me. I tell you, hey, trust me, and automatically you will. We don't have that. And I think that's where, when I said pay the bill for leadership capital comes into play here. It takes time to go through that. But my example, Ed, I have a feeling you may relate to this. My example is dealing with PRT, or physical readiness training. When it initially came out, from then until, and I want to say it came out, about 2010-ish?
Roughly around that time.
Yeah. So when it initially came out, up until I became an instructor at the BLC, basically all the way up to it, I did not believe in that system. I didn't support it. I didn't have a cause in it. And I feel like I failed those around me because I didn't believe in it, because I didn't realize what it incorporated and what we could go into. I only saw the basics of things, and I didn't understand, and after having to study it and learn it and then basically teach others about it, I realized, wow, this does play a big factor. Now, are there certain things that I don't like? Yeah, there's still certain things I don't care for. I think we should be able to go away with. But at the same time, I have I'm invested in it. I find it valuable to be able to support it now. And because I can support it, I can get other people to help me support it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Because a lot of people, when PRT came out, man, there was a lot of people that didn't embrace it. And so basically what you're saying is what a lot of people went through is we were all from the old school thought process of the Army that wasn't going to work. And I'm with you. So I knew it enough to get by, but I did, because I had to do it at ALC. I had to be evaluated on, I believe. No, SLC. Anyway, so I knew enough to get by, but until you really dig into it and you really understand it and you learn to execute it correctly, I wasn't a fan of it. I tried not to do it, but then eventually you do, and you do realize things work. I guess the Army paid all that money for it. We should have known better, but yeah, that was a difficult, just overcoming it and accepting it during that time period in 2000. I think it was 2010.
Yeah, I think so too. But that's exactly what I meant by a cause. Like we weren't actually, we didn't have ownership of that particular cause. And that's what it talks about in this article. And then the writer continues on with, When leaders foster commitment, they are able to inspire others. So fostering commitment, and it's accepting it as yours, and then others will also, because they're going to follow you because of your personal power. This style of leadership works to build trust in and from subordinates. This relationship becomes the catalyst that encourages and inspires teams to go above and beyond the minimum required of them. A leader is only as powerful as their team. I truly believe that. If the team is weak, the leader, it usually means the leader is weak. If the leader is strong, in most cases, if it's a good, strong leader, they're going to get the performance they need out of it, because it trickles down. I really feel like, and I've seen it. I saw it when I mentioned about Sergeant Major Brown. I've seen it. It trickles down. That influence, that inspiration, it works. So let me ask you your thoughts on this, where it talks about trust in and from the subordinates, and then he also goes and encourages, inspires teams to go above and beyond the minimum required. What are you thinking about that?
So I do believe in the whole team being as strong as the leader. So if you remember when we read, you and I both have read Extreme Ownership, and they talk in it about the boat crew. And the one boat crew is like dead last in all their races that they have to do, right? And the only thing they end up doing is swapping the leader for the last place crew and the crew that keeps winning these relays. They just switch the leader, who has two different leadership styles. And Jocko goes in the book, he goes into more detail about the leadership styles. But that's all they change. And then all of a sudden, the last place crew is now like first or second and more competitive. And the first place crew is down towards the bottom of the pack. And it was just as simple as that leader's impact and influence. So that's one of those personal power things, and how you lead and how the team responds to your leadership. I think when we worked at the NCO Academy, you could tell the platoons, the better platoons, you could tell based off of who their senior small group leader was. You know what I mean? You could see their influence and how it trickled down, and even negatively. So if you had a negative senior small group leader, right, then that platoon tend to have other issues internally, or they were one of those, like the whole platoon had a I don't care attitude. If you think back, you probably know exactly what platoon I'm talking about. So
yes.
But the small group leader, we're only talking about one small group leader and 4 staff sergeants, right? 4 small group leaders and 1 senior, and just his role and the impact it had on that organization. And then we had a branch chief come in, and honestly, for that branch chief that came in, he was trying to be the same thing. He was trying to use his influence as a leader to trickle down to the seniors, to trickle down to the small group leaders. There was some resistance, but I do know that after he left and went on to Korea, that there was a lot of people that missed his presence.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
No, I mean, but I like how you really, I enjoyed how you brought up the thing about Jocko's book, Extreme Ownership, with the boat crew. I do recommend people to read that chapter, because it really does say something to any type of leader. If you have a team that isn't performing, and then a new leader comes in and they start performing, you knew what the problem was. And I'm telling you, Ed, I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand multiple times. And I can definitely say that me taking over for John, he did a great job at everything. He's very task oriented. He did an amazing job. We may have different personalities. That's it. But to tell you the truth, I felt like I took on a well-oiled machine from him, because of how he developed things. I want to read this. This is a quote, actually, from the guy that actually writes this. He does another quote a little bit further on. So this is his quote. It says, "One of the great leaders of my career and personal mentor showed me the effective leadership through personal power was through his daily and consistent actions. He would go out of his way to greet every soldier he came in contact with. This command sergeant major explained to me that respect is not deserved or granted. It is earned. Soldiers will do absolutely anything for a leader whom they respect and trust. To this day, I make a constant effort to earn the respect and trust of my subordinates. I love that. I love that idea. As a matter of fact, I know I've actually tried to do that multiple times. Additionally, you know what I would add to this? Not only is saying hello to somebody a good thing, but also, for instance, I don't like to, and now have I done it before? Yes. But I don't like to do it as much as if I see a deficiency, right? Somebody who's not doing something they're supposed to, not wearing the uniform correctly, or just something's going on. I'll approach them. I will greet them. Hey, how are you doing today? And they'll greet me back. And then I'll lean closer to them. Maybe there's somebody else around because I want to make it a personal conversation between me and that individual. And for instance, say, hey, you're not supposed to wear that particular hat with this uniform, right? And then I'll lean back to see if they say yes or no. And then I'll lean back forward again, just as I would remind them, hey, make sure you reference the blue book. You got to do the right thing even when nobody's looking. Then normally pat them on the shoulder and say, hey, thank you, and then walk away. And to me, I think that's more engaging. Now, some people are just knuckleheads, and you got to go full force at them. But I don't find that is the automatic. That's what I'm automatically going to go to, right? If it's somebody that's continuously that I've made corrections to over and over and over again. Yeah, no, I think I'm probably gonna go straight to a full speed ahead. But that is not something I ever fall back on. I tend to reserve that for the most drastic of cases.
Some people are just knuckleheads. That's 100% true. But this does work. Just something so simple. You think about it. So where I work now, I work on the 4th floor. And beneath me is the legal. Below that's the theater movement center. And I speak to the German local nationals that work with us. I speak to if I pass you on that stairwell, I'm going to at least at a minimum say, morning, how are you? At minimum. And I may not stop. I'm going to keep it moving because I got work to do too, right? But that little... not even, I won't say effort, but it's not even an effort to just say, morning, how are you? You don't understand the impact because people, one, there's a lot of people in my organization and soldiers remember you based off of that interaction. Man, every time he sees me, he speaks to me. You know what I mean? And each time you speak, you're gaining just a little nugget of respect. And each time, and you're building on your leadership capital with a soldier who isn't in your food chain at all. They don't work for me. They don't work within my platoon, my section, whatever. But I'm still building just a little nugget in there each time by simply saying, hey, good morning. How was your weekend? How was your new year? Whatever it is, it can go a long way. And it's a powerful tool for building your personal power. So I like what Sergeant Major Farley had to say there.
Oh yeah, man. I love that. That's exactly, that's the right road to be going down. And once again, this works for anyone. It's not just a military thing here. This can work for a civilian organization.
Absolutely.
If you listen to this show and you work in a civilian organization, make it a point to say hello the first time to at least 5 people you've never worked with before, but they work at your organization. Just make it a point. Now, they may think at first, like, what is going on here? But after a while, now you do another 5 people, but you can't forget those 5 that you already said hello to. It's okay to do that. There's nothing wrong. There's no personal gain for you or that person. It just gets a little bit of communication process, and then people feel comfortable with you. And that's what's key for good personal power.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, we got a little bit more here, Ed. Talks about leaders who use personal power generally build teams with people who are committed to the organization's goals and benchmarks. Effective ways of building trust amongst a team involve activities that rely on teamwork. Leaders have to be creative in generating ideas to bring the team together, such as scheduling team building events offsite. According to Lindsay Kolowich, team outings are a great way to facilitate bonding with your team members, reduce stress, and give them the chance to know one another outside the office. And I think this kind of reminds me of, we had talked about an idea not too long ago. It was, it's a little bit far-fetched for us at this point. You may remember when I said, we should have like some type of like huge campground area, like that has like the little tiny homes in it that we have people come businesses wise, and then we'll have our our multiverse gym. They can go work out in the morning, and then a conference center that they could do things, but it would totally be off site. It's just an idea, but I mean, I'm just thinking, how often do we, does an organization get away from the work area to actually do things together? I can tell you right now, Ed, the organization I'm in right now, at this point, up until this past September, had not had an organizational day for almost 3 years at all. When we did the Command Climate Survey, that was one of the main key things that people said they felt like was that was lacking. They wanted just to have an organizational day. Most units I've ever been in, Ed, I don't know about you, most units I've ever been in, people are all like, oh, organized fun, forced fun, volunteer. People don't like it. But I was shocked to know, because it hadn't happened in so long, that people kind of craved it, which is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of, it helps me understand a little bit more about that human dynamic, and also being able to get, build bonding outside of the work area, because sometimes you need to have fun and get to know the people you work with. And I can only imagine what it's like in a civilian sector type organization. They probably have, I don't know, like company picnic or something like that. I mean, I'm guessing that's kind of one of those things that organizations look to do also.
Yeah, it's so I always have like little events. I don't like organizational day, but little all-site events. I can remember being in when you and I were in aviation, but I was in 4th Battalion first, and we did all-site physical training. We went to the Greenway, and we did physical training there, like ran and you know what? It was a big hit with everybody, because you were away from the flagpole. You were in your civilian workout gear, appropriate civilian workout gear. And it was just a different atmosphere. Here, one of the challenges is, of course, we can't go off base in uniform. So it takes a little more. But the person I worked for last, he would plan these, he called them fellowships. And in the beginning, it was like the same 2 or 3 people would bring their civilian clothes, and we would go out to eat. And then it started developing to, like now it's 5 of us. Now it's 6 of us. And now when he has these events, it's to the point where it's like 1 or 2 that don't show up. You know what I mean? Like, and usually that's those people that just have a negative taste about the organization or the military. And unfortunately, that's a thing that happens. So, but it started, people started looking forward to it. Hey, when are we going to do another fellowship Friday? So it turned into a thing that helped. And like you said, it's a team building thing. It doesn't seem like it. Like we're just going to eat, but you get out there, you have some conversations. And, one of the unspoken rules was we're not going to talk about work. So, of course, you're off in the civilian sector. So you have to be cautious anyway because of operational security and stuff. So you really can't speak about everything anyway. So you take the work discussions out. Well, now we get to know each other on a personal basis. We get to know more, oh, he has children, his kid's my age or whatever. So those are great things. Company picnics, things like that for the civilian sector, those are doable, and they're usually great events, good turnouts, my sister is big in with her organization. She plans events for them and tries to make things unique, if you even think about like we talked about Jocko earlier in the episode. What about Jocko, where he comes out and he does these speaking engagements and those type of team building and team outings? Yeah, it's work related, but it's something that breaks up the monotony, and it takes you as a team to to listen to these things, and then maybe whoever the speaker is has events set up to kind of reinforce what they're talking about. So yeah, those are all awesome tools to help build personal power, I think, and build your team and your organization.
I was thinking about it as you were talking about that, about the going out for the fellowship lunches and stuff like that. It made me kind of think about when we were at the academy and we would go just grab a quick lunch in the middle of the day, and it would be you, me, Rick, Quentin, Sarah, Tom. those times, those are memorable times that actually allowed me to further trust those individuals, because I felt like we just kind of connected on a different level, but we're just getting lunch. And that's why I really do think that those types of things can help. Just go get lunch as a group together and just sit around and joke for an hour for lunch and then go back to work. Sometimes you can see the relationship building with that. But here we go. When a team works together to achieve a common goal, it builds a sense of cohesiveness. The more people that a leader gets commitment from will equate to a greater amount of passion and energy during mission accomplishment. Leaders are inherently in positions of authority, but it is up to the leader to earn the trust and respect of their subordinates to commit. I couldn't say it any better. I think we've definitely hit upon this idea of personal power and really where it comes from, and it's generating that trust and whatnot.
Yeah, and and the leaders. So this is one of the challenges for young leaders, right? Is to figure out how to. I don't want to leverage, and we're going to talk about positional power. I don't want to leverage my positional power to get things done, because it doesn't enhance the team in any way, shape, or form. It's a matter of a young leader saying, okay, I am the leader of this team for my organization. How do I earn the respect and trust of the members of my team, and without leveraging my authority? So that's one of those very young leadership challenges that I think that, your experiences help mold you and guide you. And then you're like, now for you and I think we could build a team a little. I know for a fact Ed can build a team now easier than he could when he was a brand new sergeant. And I think that that's the same thing in any organization, civilian, military, or whatever, is you learn that over the years, your experience. And now I have a bunch of tools in my toolkit. So, those lunches that you talked about, well, that's not really working. So what else do I have? I have this. Fort Campbell had that leadership confidence course right outside. So stuff like that, paintball events. I did that at Fort Hood with my platoon, and it was a great team building event. So those you have so much in your toolkit now, but that day that they said, hey, Sergeant Weber, you're in charge of these however many mechanics, maintainers, you had no clue how to build a team when you first became in charge.
Oh, yeah, so definitely.
It's a leadership challenge to me.
Oh, yeah. And when you said that within the tool bag, I think there's a lot of pieces to that. We talked about the trust. I personally think before you go into organization, if you see something's wrong, before you could ever try to make the change, you got to get the trust of the people first, or there's going to be resistance to change. Because if you get their trust, then you'll understand how certain things affect individuals, and then you can actually target them in a sense. And I don't mean target as in like, shoot them down. I mean, as in you can make the change effective within how they see things too. You can alter it slightly, or you could maybe they ask for opinions about what they think about this. I mean, there's certain ways to go about it, but you got to get that trust, that leadership capital that we talk about. And that's where that personal power really comes in.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking, so one of my moves, being military, it's a little bit different, obviously. One of my moves I love is when you show up to an organization and you've got these subordinates, they're going to be your soldiers, and you pick up a mop and mop the latrine, they lose their mind with how much respect they gain for you immediately. Like, what is he doing? Why is he mopping? He's in charge. So it's something so simple. So in the civilian sector, you just got to figure out, what is your mop? What is your simple thing that you could do that make them go, that person is in charge of us, right? Like, what are they doing? It's that easy to me, Yeah,
I think that's a form of humility, my friend.
I just really like mopping.
Yeah. So we're going to jump into positional power real quick before we get to the end of the show here. And what the author has to say here is, in contrast to personal power, positional power is simply authority automatically provided by a position or station. It requires zero effort, trust, or unit cohesion, and often leaders who rely solely upon their positional authority fail to improve their unit. Influencing subordinates using positional power causes them to accomplish tasks through intimidation or fear of repercussions. That fear of the intimidation and fear of repercussions, you'll know if that's going on in an organization because people avoid you. Straight up. There are people, and I'm not going to say in what point in my career, I don't want to like pinpoint any one time or one person or anything, but I can say for sure there are people that I have specifically avoided because I knew there was never going to be a compliment from them. There was never going to be a hey, how you doing? They were just negative, and they wanted to belittle you, or they wanted to cut holes in everything you did, even though you put a lot of effort and stuff. So I purposely avoid those people because I'm not going to waste my time and my efforts to deal with basically the negative Nancys of the world who just want to make other people miserable, which I never understood, Ed. I just don't understand why somebody else wants to make other people miserable. And I've had people in my career like that. You know, one of them, but I mean, it's just, there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah. And so this takes me back to when I was in the Army, like I talked about earlier, the first time in 91 to 95, this is how you led. This is how you led. This was the bottom line then. So we have evolved, right? We figured things out. But in that time period, it was very much, I'm the staff sergeant, go do it. It was no, you know what I mean? Like there was no building a team. There was no personal relationships. Like that was out of bounds. So as a private, your Sergeant E5 may host a barbecue at his home. But anything senior to him, that wasn't happening. Any kind of off-duty time, that wasn't happening with any of these, with anybody at that point. And it was very positional. I'm the first sergeant. I said do this. Well, this is ridiculous. And it was the same kind of rules now, right? If it wasn't safety or illegal or moral, you had no excuse not to do it. So, and you had more. That's why I think back then, you wouldn't dream of talking to a first sergeant because you feared him. Why did you fear him? Because of positional power. You had so much fear as a private. You weren't talking. You might talk to a staff sergeant. That's as high as you were talking. Anything above a staff sergeant, which basically is your first line leader's boss, you weren't talking to him because you were afraid to talk to him. In that time period, right? In the 90s, in the 80s, probably that was what was needed at that time. This is a new generation. We've talked about many, many times. Things have changed. I like the way things are now. There's some things that I miss from that kind of leadership, but I think positional power, and I do think positional power still has a time and place. I think there probably are situations where it is necessary to execute based off of your position in an organization, but I also think it's like a 1 in 20 thing, if that.
So I feel very much like you do about, I don't like the idea of fear and whatnot, but to me, there are certain instances where people should have the fear. As the first sergeant, I want people to be able to approach me and have a conversation with me if they feel, or so they can trust me that I'll take care of them. But at the same time, I do want them to have the fear that if they're knowingly doing something wrong, they're scared.
Yes.
That to me, for instance, drinking and driving. If they're drinking and driving, they better have the fear in them because I don't play that game.
I want them in my office about to pee on themselves if they got a DUI. They need to be scared.
Yeah, if they're physically abusing their spouse, they're going to be scared, all right. You know what I mean? Like that's when the personal power will turn into positional power real quick with me to create that fear. But those are what you consider as drastic cases. Those are not everyday occurrences. If that's happening every day, then we may have to take a look at the leadership aspect of, the standards of discipline. Are the standards of discipline there? How are they being enforced? Are they being enforced through fear or are they being enforced through personal power? That's a key thing. I really believe that. It's how we address people too. The fact that I will lean into somebody near their ear close enough and just make it a conversation between he and I or her and I when it comes to making a correction for a deficiency shows that I'm respecting them enough that I'm not going to belittle them in front of everybody else. And they respect that. People want to have discipline. They want to be disciplined in a sense to a certain extent, so they know they're meeting the mark. But it's just, I think there's a certain, it's not a fine line. I think it's very black and white or righting wrong. And once you go over on the wrong side, hey, it's full on, man. Ed, we get this.
It's time and place, like we said. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But it's time and place, like we said. There's it's scenario driven. What is the given scenario, and that determines if that, if it's a positional power is necessary. Like you said, DUIs,
yes,
domestic assault, things like that. There are times for it. It's just it can't be the end all like it was in the 80s and 90s.
No,
for us as leaders.
No, it can't be. And I think it's because we've evolved. We're evolving, constantly evolving as leaders and learning how to be better leaders. And the funny thing is we learn it through history. Humility is not something that just all of a sudden started as leaders. Humility has been around for years. I can show you many areas where George Washington had humility. And that was many years ago. So it's not something new. It's been around a while. But hey, I want to hit this next quote, and then when we get into a little bit further about this positional power, because I really like what he says here about positional power. But this quote first. It is not only important to learn from great leaders, but just as important to learn what you don't want to become by poor or toxic leaders. Back when I was a first sergeant, there was a command sergeant major in a nearby unit that was the type of leader that preached one thing but did the opposite. He used the power of his position and not the power of influence to frighten others into doing what he wanted. On a daily basis, this command sergeant major would talk down to soldiers, smoke close to the building, stand with his hands in his pockets, and continually use profanity towards soldiers. And while this was a negative style of leadership, it was important for me to witness because I don't ever want to become like that. Now, I completely agree with that. I think 21 years has gotten me to this point of thinking that, and I thought about this long before, but 21 years of seeing things and interaction, I've learned it better and better each time. I'm learning from those around me, and I don't want to make the same mistakes others are making. And it's, we're going to do a show down the road, and it's really about, can a tyrant really make you better? Well, I absolutely think a tyrant can. It's just you can only handle him for so long. But, what do you think about what he had to say there, Ed?
Yeah, well, we've also talked about this a couple of times on the show, so we kind of know where I stand on this. You can learn from somebody, from their negative example, what you want to be and what you don't want to be. I completely agree with that. I think that the question is, when you say, oh, we're going to do the show about the tyrant, can we learn from a tyrant, right? I think it's one of those age-old questions, kind of like, are leaders born or are they made? I think it's right in line with that. It's one of those things that just everybody has a different kind of viewpoint. Nobody's viewpoint is necessarily wrong or right. I have learned from poor leaders. As a matter of fact, my organization right now just had a changeover, not at a high level, but they had to make some changes because, soldiers were being counseled for not being where they were supposed to be, but the leader wasn't attending those formations either. So
wow,
you're counseling me for something you're not doing. So that got nixed really, really fast. But those, matter of fact, Brian, I would tell you that the negative leaders I've had, I probably learned more from them than I have from the good leaders, because the good leaders are following stuff that's ingrained in you, right? Like, you're taught, set the example, be the example. We're taught that throughout our career. So we know that's a thing. What you pick up usually from a good leader is tactics, techniques, and procedures for what they do. You had that spreadsheet, kind of figuring out who was going to be rated where for NCOERs because you had so many NCOs working for you. So that's something that you can take from a good leader that's not taught to us.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Being where you're supposed to be, in the right uniform, being there when your soldiers are supposed to be there. Those type of things are things we just know. You see good leaders and you're like, well, that's an example of that, but that's great. Where on the other side, these negative leaders, they give you so much new, counseling people for being someplace, but they weren't there. Failing evaluations on the Army physical fitness test or things like that. Belittling, oh my goodness, calling your first sergeant the last sergeant, belittling your senior leadership in front of soldiers. So there's so much more to choose from the negatives, because doctrinally and in the classrooms over our careers, we're taught the other way. And some of it's common sense leadership too. So that's the other reason you don't learn as much, in my opinion, from a great leader, because some of it is just some common sense stuff that whether you're military or not, I can't write you up, because I think, is that the civilian term? It's been a long time. I can't write you up for doing something that I do too. I can't write you up because you were 5 minutes late to work twice this week, but I'm 5 minutes late every day. That's common sense stuff. That doesn't mean you're military or whatever. That's a civilian sector. Absolutely. This is leadership truth.
Oh, yeah. None of that do as I say, not as I do type stuff. And you mentioned that, you can learn more from a negative type one than a positive one. And I think I kind of have a hypothesis with that, Ed. And I think it is because when you have the good positive leader, you just keep trucking on,
Mm-hmm.
and you're constantly working and you're just doing anything. But when you have that negative leader, you actually pause a moment and you're like, what? Wait a second. That doesn't make sense. Why would you do
None?
So you actually take a pivot point there. Whereas if you have a good leader, you just kind of keep going and going. But I don't want to get too far into that because we're going to save some of that for the tyrant one. Ed, right here, he says, and this is the part that I really like, this next little small paragraph. But he says, when people follow leaders because they have to, the leader only gains short-term compliance, not engagement. When this style of leadership is exercised, there is little incentive to work beyond immediate directions, as their only personal goal is to complete the minimum tasks required so as to not be punished. This also results in a unit's top talent leaving as quickly as possible. I'm
Interesting.
I'm gonna proclaim that I have been in this situation. I have been in the person who is just time to go. It is time to go, or that person needs to leave. In more than one time, right? And I totally understand what that doing that. The minimum task required. I sympathize with people that are in that position because I understand they don't want to be around that. They don't want to be around that type of individual, and it's sad. It really is.
Yeah, no, we're recording here shortly. We're going to record talent management, right? And this is one of the things that comes from poor talent management or poor resource or poor performance management, whichever term you want to use, because I think in the civilian sector, performance management is probably a little more than talent management, or it's around the same. This is one of the results, though, that your unit's top talent leaving as quickly as possible. And I've seen this military where, you have that old reliable horse and you beat the horse and you beat the horse, and every task goes to that same captain over and over. And he's outside of his scope and his lane because you keep making him go outside of it, and you burn him out. And then he's just like, I am so ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
And why is he getting all these taskings? Well, positional authority, positional power. His senior is saying, hey, knock this out. Hey, look into this. A logistics planner should not be at the unit level. We're at a much higher level than, the bottom line guys on the ground working level, but you got guys who are involved in their planning at that level. And that makes them frustrated over time and space. And I absolutely have seen them where they're like, yeah, it is time for me. How can I get out of here? And the next thing you know, they're on their phone to their branch manager or to their manager. And they're saying, hey, I got to go. Where can you send me next?
Well, that connects very much to the very next part we're going into, Ed, because Jim Harder and Amy Adkins, they actually make a quote here that's workers want to feel connected to their jobs, managers, and companies. If those ties are not there, they have more incentive to quit. And then they go on, just like you said, Ed, about while soldiers can't up and just leave a unit as easily as a civilian can leave a workplace or whatnot, they can make sure they transfer out as fast as possible in order to find a unit whose leader does promote morale and motivation. That's exactly what you just said. It's like, as soon as I know my time is up at this unit, I'm calling somebody to get me on orders to go to the next one until I can find a place where I feel comfortable. The sad thing is when you do finally find that place, and then all of a sudden that leadership leaves, and you're like, oh man.
Well, and then, so even I would imagine in the civilian sector, if you have so let's just say you're working in the field of cybersecurity, right? I feel like if you're a high performer in your organization, your name is probably out beyond your organization.
Right.
So people are tracking your performance and who you are and what your credentials are outside that organization. So when the organization gets to the point where you're like, I am ready to go now, it's not like you're going to be hurting. I'm sure that you can call up, if I work for company ABC, well, XYZ is looking for a cybersecurity lead, and I'm calling, and out I go. You know what I mean? And you may get more money and incentives to go because they're wanting you to leave that organization. So that organization has damaged your loyalty, which is also something I think we're going to talk about in the upcoming episodes. That organization has damaged your loyalty by mismanaging you and using positional power and cause you to want to leave. And now, maybe this company's maybe XYZ's been calling and saying, hey, Brian, like, we're really interested in your services. We'll give you $10,000 more a year than what you're making now, but you're loyal to ABC. You stay. And you stay. And then you get fed up, and then you're like, I'm out of here.
Oh, yeah. I remember hearing about a study, and that's the problem, is I can't remember where I heard it at, or it's either I read it or heard it. And they talked about the fact that people, it may have been with you, and when one of the shows in the past, but where people will actually take less money if they feel like it's a better situation they're in. And it's like, that makes sense. I basically can pay you less if you feel more comfortable, and you enjoy being where you're working. It sounds like a kind of thing that I definitely would want to engage as an employer, make it more comfortable anyways. But Ed, we're going to actually get into these characteristics of influence, and it's only a few, and it won't take very long to get through this and to finish out what he has to say within this article. But he says,
all righty.
When leaders create an environment for subordinates to express initiative, it allows the subordinate to feel a sense of empowerment. Empowerment's a big thing. I know when I was going through, Ed, my my bachelor's program, there was actually a large section within one of my courses that dealt mainly in just empowerment. And they just reflected upon empowerment and how you can do it and all these different things. And you don't realize like how much there's a difference, though, because some people tend to think empowerment means delegation, and it's not the same thing, because empowerment's really basically making them feel as if they're running the show or they're running this, not just keep being given the work to do for you that you're going to take credit for. But right here, he says, Jake Herway from Gallup says, an organization full of employees who believe they belong is an organization full of employees who feel purposeful, inspired, and alive. In other words, engaged. And that's the whole point. Empowerment actually creates engagement. And the many times that I've been in an organization where I felt that way, it's almost like I didn't just produce, but overproduced whatever it was. A good example. I was a recruiter for 3 years. When I was a recruiter, my first 6 months were they were kind of miserable. Didn't care for the leader that I had above me and that I worked for. And I couldn't grasp onto things because of all the constraints he would put on me. Then I moved to another location, and I stayed at that location really the rest of my time as a recruiter. But I moved, and then I started learning different tricks of the trade type thing from another guy who had the station I was at, but then he left, so I had it by myself. And once I had that, like I owned the place type thing, or, I had ownership over it, and I felt more empowered. That's when I really like ramped up production. Became top recruiter, for the year, and for this of the top small station, all these different things, and I was able to kind of take my game to a whole new level. It got so to a point where I almost considered to change over and be a permanent recruiter. I almost did it. But then this is where they messed up. And this is where they I would have stayed out there, and I probably would have kept just going at it. I had one bad month. I overproduced the month before, and I had one bad month. And when I say produce, so for instance, I had to have 2 people join the Army. Instead, I got 5 people to join the Army, which is a big feat in a sense, especially the time frame I did it. The very next month, I had 0 because I didn't hold on to anybody for the following month, because that happens. You're not supposed to do it, but it happens. And I had to go to this, what they call zero rollers training. And the people would sit there. You had to do this round robin thing, and people would like dissect all you're doing and stuff and telling you what you're doing wrong. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like I was just pretty much crowned the best recruiter in this entire battalion a couple months ago. And I had one bad month. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just, you can't recognize sometimes people just have a bad time, have a bad month, but that completely changed my outlook. And I went from being engaged and empowered, engaged, to disengaged and ready. And just like it says right there, results in a unit's top talent leaving as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. Right then, I told my wife, and she'll attest to this, I'm ready to go. I'm done. I'm not staying here. I don't like how they're treating me. That type of thing. And some people may, no. There's a certain level of how you should treat your top performers. We've talked about this, Ed. You remember not too long back where you talked about Phil Jackson didn't treat Michael Jordan the same way he treated Tony Kukoc.
Yeah.
Obviously you treat them both good, but some of them have earned a little bit more, but you have to be careful. And I understand. But that's how I can associate to that whole idea of, staying engaged.
Yeah, no, that's actually that's a really good example, and I'm kind of glad that they did treat you like that, though, because then you wouldn't have met me at the mighty 101st, and we wouldn't be doing this podcast, Brian. So yeah,
probably not.
Good things happen out of it.
Exactly. So hey, I'm gonna go a little bit further, because then he actually, in this article, it's funny. We went through all this different stuff, but he only mentions these characteristics one time, and it's just a little secession here. It's kind of funny. Leaders are more capable of influencing subordinates by being persons of character, integrity, trustworthiness, and service. Now, if I think back, Ed, to people that I felt like were true influencers upon me, positive influencers, I could tell you, I could probably explain to you, I could give you bullet points on their character, their integrity, their trustworthiness, and their service. And I already kind of mentioned earlier how much, I loved working for Sergeant Major Brian way back when. And I can't wait to hopefully get a chance to do it again in the future. But I could definitely see that. And I bet you could probably see that in the same people you've worked for also, couldn't you?
Yeah, so the integrity thing, the Sergeant Major Wright, he was often accused at the lower level. So some soldiers, when you come in and you start doing things by the books and you start doing things doctrinally correct, you can get a reputation. People don't like it, so they start lashing out. But I can tell you from sitting in so many meetings with him, having discussions with him and working with him, that his integrity was beyond reproach. Like he wasn't going to compromise it for anybody. So that was one of his big things. And because of that, because I knew he was going to be truthful and sometimes a little too truthful, but it builds that trust, which it's funny that that's also a negative thing to be too truthful at times. But it builds that it would build trust for me in him. So, when other people were like, oh, he's this, he's that, I was like, no. I mean, there's a reason the guy is still in the Army. He's a commandant at an academy. There's a reason for those things, and it's not a lack of integrity. It's, he taught me, I told you before, he taught me the principle of a common enemy, and he was the common enemy. And some people that was a good thing, but some people it was not, and they lashed out, and there was a lot of allegations that were unfounded that were made to try to get him. Basically, they were trying to stage a coup almost in the unit to get him out of power because he was holding them to a standard that they didn't like, basically. So, the integrity thing, and he never wavered. He didn't compromise his integrity. So, okay, well, you know what? I'll stop doing things the way I do business now. He kept going. So, I would definitely go back to work for him. But I don't think I want to go back to the engineers, which he's probably way beyond now.
Oh, yeah.
I'd go be on his staff at a brigade level, though. I 100% would.
Yeah, I bet you would. And, I thought about that, too, about, people. Here's a good words to live by for you Army folk, not you civilians so much, but definitely you Army folk. If you don't want to be on the cover of Army Times, make sure you have a good positive character, have some integrity, worthiness, and service. But so last part here, he talks about model this way. This means if you want your employees to care, show enthusiasm, and appreciation, you must behave in the same manner. So if I want my soldiers to show respect, I need to be respectful. If I want my soldiers to have loyalty, I've got to show that loyalty. I mean, I could go down through the whole row of Army values and say, if I want them to do that, I need to show them, and it needs to be physically seen. I can't talk about it, right? Sometimes too many people that they talk the talk but can't walk the walk. Isn't that an old Ric Flair saying?
No, it is, but it's also the great Dwayne Johnson who once said, don't just talk about it, be about it, or don't just sing it, bring it, or whatever way he was cutting a promo at that time. That said kind of the same thing, though. If you think about it, don't just sing it, bring it. Don't talk about it, don't sing about it, do it.
Well, I mean, exactly. And one of the most important traits an influential leader has is integrity. Integrity leads to trust. Trust builds influence, and influence fosters that commitment. So if you talk the talk, then you need to walk that walk and make sure you do it that way. So in conclusion, we're gonna sum it all up. This is what he has to say at the very end of this entire article, which, by the way, I enjoyed this article since I've read it a couple times now. When your subordinates accomplish their tasks because of who you are and not because of what rank you are, you have gained the ability to influence through personal power. Leaders who influence others with personal power lead by example and are the positive blueprint for others as they mature and become leaders themselves. As best-selling author and leadership expert John C. Maxwell once stated, a leader who produces other leaders multiplies their influence. That's I couldn't agree with it anymore.
Read it to me again, Brian. Read it to me again.
A leader who produces other leaders multiplies their influences. Yeah, to me that's that idea of being a force multiplier.
Yep.
I put it on NCORs before. When I've seen people that are good at it, I've actually put on X amount of troops, blah blah blah, whatever, a true force multiplier of the Army, type thing, and that's exactly the truth.
Yeah, no, I wanted you to read it again because it's also, we talked about legacy. That's really your leadership legacy, right? Like if I leave great leaders behind, and I'm a force multiplier, but I'm leaving that's my legacy. Is those great leaders that are like, when that great leader makes Sergeant Major and he says, well, I remember way back when I worked for Sergeant First Class Weber, and he taught me X, Y, and Z. Those are legacy items. And then for you and I right now, like every time we talk about the bearded ninja, that is part of his legacy. And for him to have an influence on seniors to me, that's even a bigger nod to his legacy. Like, we're senior leaders. We both had 18 years in the military at the time when he comes into our careers, 17, 18 years. And for him to be able to still have that kind of impact, that speaks to the legacy of the Bearded Ninja.
Brought to you by Bearded Ninja Beard Balm. Now, hey, so what you said there, though, what you said there about his legacy, not only does that support what we spoke about with influences your legacy, but I think it also supports the entire idea of the lifelong learning. Because not only are we receiving, but we're also transmitting. And what I mean by that is we're receiving this information, we're receiving this new knowledge, and we're understanding, but also we're accepting the fact that we don't know it all. We don't have all the answers, and we're willing to learn and then to pass that on as our legacy also.
Yeah.
Perhaps maybe even in this show.
I mean, and I would like to think that, that he demonstrates some lifelong learning in his dealings with us. Maybe he learned something from us too. 2 old E7s in the army. Maybe he was like, you know what? That's interesting. So, I mean, and hopefully, because I know that he listens to the show, hopefully he learns from us each week a little something and keeps his lifelong learning streak going.
Well, I do too. But with that, Ed, hey, we're at the end of this show, man. So I've got a task, and it's a pretty simple one. Pretty easy. Episode 60 task. Use your personal influence to help somebody else in a positive manner by sharing this show with them. And like I said before, you don't have to share this show on your social media or anything. I'm not asking you to do that. What I'm asking you to do is, you've probably listened to a few episodes by now. And if you haven't, this is your first episode. I hope it was as good as you thought it would be. But go back and check some of our previous episodes.
Welcome to the team.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to the influencer community. But what I want you to do is, I'm asking you to pick out one of these shows that you really enjoyed and somebody else could benefit from. Build some trust with them, right? Say, hey, listen, I heard this Instinctive Influencer podcast. This episode, blah, blah, was really good. And I'd like to let you know about it because I really think it kind of goes down the alley that, you've been dealing with, or maybe it's something you've been interested in, that type of thing. So what that does is that you're going to create trust because you're offering them something up for free. One, that's a big thing. Offer it up to them. And then maybe even later down the road, discuss it with them after and see what they thought. And maybe they've come up with some really good ideas pertaining to the tasks of that show. And then they join the closed Facebook group, and then they post a message, and then other people see it. And now somebody else learns this from them. See how that thing trickles? That's how we create an influencer community. So once again, your episode 60 task is to use your personal power of influence in a positive manner and share this show with somebody else. Ed, I don't have much more for this show. Is there anything you wanted to round out with them?
Well, I would encourage them to check our social media platforms out, 101 Influence, on Instagram, Facebook. We're also both located on the Twitter. And then, of course, our website for Instinctive Influencers. They can go in there, check those things out. They can see my embarrassing picture on the website that Brian insists on having up there. It's really not embarrassing. I don't care. I have a poodle. So what if I'm 6'4" and I have a poodle? But anyway, check those things out, and your continued support is greatly appreciated by both of us. It keeps us recording. It feels like every week now we're recording, but we're building up our stash again because Brian is going to be doing some traveling now and gonna be missing some weeks of being able to record, and he's gonna be reunited with his great and wonderful family. So we got to get ahead of the game. So we really encourage you to continue to support us.
I'm very thankful. But with that, I am Brian.
And I am Ed.
This has been the Instinctive Influencer Podcast. Remember, use your personal power before using your positional power. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.